Hi, everybody. My name is Craig Myers. I'm a class of 2018 UCLA Bruin. Really happy to be presenting to you guys today. I actually saw a couple of my buddies in the call, Maxime, and it's great to see that you guys are a part of this. So really quick, wanted to give you guys a presentation on networking. And really quick, I'll let Steve introduce himself. So Steve, you want to go while I'm pulling up the screen?
Sure. Thanks, Craig. And it's been a pleasure. I just met Craig just a couple weeks ago. We decided we'd collaborate on this session. And it just shows the power of Bruins who have similar mindsets and values and energy levels. So my name is Steve Yu. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and the Assistant Dean at the law school here. I'm a double Bruin with the econ undergrad and an MBA from the business school. I'm also the president of the Anderson Alumni Association. I sit on the main campus alumni board as the ASU-CLA rep, and I was former president of the Westside Network as well. And I'll preface that the reason I even do all this stuff, none of this stuff is paid. I get zero money for this, and I spend a lot of time doing it, but it's because of the network, because of the people that you get to meet. And so Craig and I are hoping to drop some knowledge and some experience and hopefully some wisdom nuggets as well to each of you in terms of what it means to network and really take advantage of what being part of UCLA and being an alum of UCLA has to offer.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Steve. Really quick, can everybody see my screen? Can I just get a thumbs up? So to the point of what Steve said, we want to talk a little bit about the art of networking. And we want to talk a little bit about the definitions, the bios behind that, but more so than anything else, we want to give you guys the tips and tricks so that you're ready by the end of this presentation to be able to take off into the world and know that you are a networking expert.
So what is networking? Let's just put a label on it and define it. There's this definition from dictionary.com, a supportive system of sharing information and services among individuals and groups having a common interest. Pretty straightforward, makes a lot of sense. But we thought we'd spice it up a little bit and throw in this urban dictionary. I don't even know, do the kids even use urban dictionary anymore? Do they? Okay, cool.
A little bit.
The definition there was the yuppie euphemism for kissing butt, but in order to get a job or obtain a raise and promotion. And so the network is, to me, is really more just about building connections, finding rapport, finding people with similar values and interests. And whether that helps you get a job or a raise or a promotion, that would be a side benefit. But surrounding yourself with like-minded people who are trying to excel and do good with their lives. Maxime, okay, yeah, it kind of gets to the point, doesn't it? And throughout some of the slides, we'll throw in some secrets and some obvious things. One of the secrets with networking is it's not how big your network is, how many people you meet, how many business cards you collect when we're back into a post-COVID world and back in person. And so quality of the network is better than the quantity. And you'll hear this theme throughout. And then the obvious is, like, look, it doesn't always work. You may try to meet someone, build a connection, and you just don't quite click. That's okay. It happens, right? It happens all the time in your everyday life where it's just like there's something like 8 billion people in this world. There's plenty of people in this world. You can find more people in your network.
Well said, Steve. And, the next question is who benefits from networking? There's a common misconception that goes along with the word networking where we think, hey, it's for people who are in sales roles, right? They have to network. They have to find their way into making new sales so that they can get commission based off of that. And in fact, I don't believe that that's true. I think that there's 3 different ways to be able to benefit from networking. First, for people who are just searching for job opportunities. The way that I found my job at Bolton was through networking through my internal network that I've created at UCLA and then was introduced into that job. The second is, like I said, people that have worked into the sales commission role as well. But third, it's also people who are looking to expand their business education and career development. I would even argue the thing that I've gotten the most out of from networking over the course of the last 2 or 3 years in the business world is not even necessarily from leads from business, but it's also just from the amount that you can learn from talking to someone about what they do, their background, who they are, why they chose to go in those positions can very much do a lot for you in terms of educating you on how to go into the business professional world successfully. So really
And
quick.
before we move on, Craig, I'll add that the network is not about what you need right now. It might be what you need in a few years from now. Maybe you want to go to grad school, go to business school, right? Maybe you want to explore different options. Maybe you want a career change somewhere down the road, or maybe you're in school and you're trying to find where you want to go next. So the network is in terms of from a time standpoint, is not just right now what I need right now, but having a much broader view of things.
Networking events can get really very intimidating at times, and a lot of times when you with your goal of trying to connect with someone, it can feel very shaded, especially when you first walk into that opportunity. So the question presents itself: how do you make the most out of these events? What do you do? How do you prepare? Steve, you want
And
to
so
take it over?
it's a good segue into something that I try to do as I go to these networking functions. And a lot of this that's I'm going to talk about on this slide is pre-COVID or post-COVID days when we're back in person, and putting together a plan. You don't just go and just show up and see what happens. I like to be a little bit more deliberate about things. For example, do research on what event you're going to. Who's organizing it? Who's going to be there? Is it a group of people in terms of a certain industry, a certain company, certain job function? In understanding that, I'll give a tip here that when it comes to organizers, I actually like to get to events early and find out who the organizers are and even offer help if I can. And so it gives me a way to build rapport with organizers and actually network with them. And the organizers tend to know everybody else. Maybe you set goals on the number of people. And I also said the quality is better. Maybe you make just a couple of good contacts. But if you know what, you really need to get yourself out there. Maybe you set a number for yourself. I like to evaluate the layout of the room. Where's the restroom? Where's the food? Where's the bar? For those of you who are over 21, and kind of get where are people congregating or dispersing around? Greg, do you want to add something?
Yeah, really quick. So that last bullet point, find the nexus. The quickest way to build out your network as quickly as possible is find the person who is the most involved and the person who knows everyone, because that way their network can become your network. So a great example of this is, I think the nexus in this group is Gloria Ko. If you guys want to connect with Gloria, I know that she's more than happy to connect with you and connect you with any of the other Bruins who are on this chat. But a great concept to walk into an event with is to make sure that you try to find the person who's rather in charge or the nexus, and they can help introduce you to the people that you could be potentially looking for. So with that
great
said,
point there. And in terms of, there's a bullet here about observing attendees. I like to just check out what's the energy like? What's the engagement like? Are people feeling really free flowing and it's good, or it feels kind of quiet or reserved? And just so that I know how to engage with other people as well. A couple of tips: grab more than one napkin, and I'm hoping that you can all guess why that is. And oftentimes at these networking functions, people grab food, they grab drinks, but they forget to grab napkins, and invariably someone gets something on their face, they spill something, and so that's your opportunity to hand them something. It's a way to open a conversation for them to owe you something. And then of course, dry your hands after the restroom. And who knows if we even have handshakes going forward. Maybe it'll be elbow bumps or whatnot, but this seems like kind of a silly one, but it actually is one that actually is important.
and it's funny, I have to say that when Steve first put that note in the PowerPoint slides, I had to ask him. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about with the napkins thing. Could you please expand on that? But it's a great concept, because he is absolutely right. Napkins, you would be surprised at how many people forget to bring napkins. But anyways, the next topic, what to do after hello. Steve, do you want to talk about the handshake?
Yeah, there's so much about a handshake, and my own complaint about school education, junior high, high school, they leave a lot of things out of the education that are just so practical. You would think a handshake's a handshake, right? Shake hands and whatnot. There's so many different elements, and normally in these presentations, if we were in person, I mean, we could spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes on just mastering the handshake. So I'm going to give you just some high level elements of it to keep in mind. And again, who knows if we ever go back to shaking hands again, and maybe the next time we teach this, it's like, okay, how to master the elbow bump. We'll see. But how far you are from the other person in terms of, are you reaching over this way in terms of making that handshake? How tight is that grip? Are you the bone crusher and you're trying to show how strong you are? Or maybe you're the opposite where you just offer fingers, right? You know what I'm talking about? Do you remember back in the day when we shook hands and you'd shake and the person is not squeezing back, and it is the most weird, awkward feeling. It's known as a dead fish handshake. Or how long you shake your hand, right? You think 3 shakes and then you're good. What if the person just keeps shaking and shaking and shaking? Then there is, what do you do with the other hand? Are you putting it on the person's elbow, shoulder, which shows some level of comfort, intimacy, and maybe you just met the person, so maybe that's not really appropriate either. And then also the eye contact. The worst thing you can do is when you shake hands, you do one of these things, right? You look away. You want to show a level of confidence, a level of comfort and assertiveness by making eye contact during your handshake. And again, just to want to stress that this is later on. We won't be doing any handshakes in any virtual environment or Zoom, and so it is different. But we did want to just touch upon it because it is important, because you are conveying something to the other person with just the handshake.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. Those are all really great points. And you strike me as the bone crusher type of handshake, by the way. That's what you strike me as. I'm the hugger type, where you put the hand out and just come in for the big grizzly hug. But that's neither here nor there, also not COVID appropriate. So a couple of other things. Obviously, after you say hello, there's always tends to be this pause. Where do we go with the conversation? One of the things that I found that is super helpful for me is to try to find the Trojan horse. Now, I know we're UCLA Bruins, but so forgive me for using the word Trojan in this presentation. But what I mean by that is the best way to build a relationship, a professional relationship or a personal relationship, is to find things that you guys have in common, not necessarily just from a professional side. Find out, hey, we're both Bruins. Talk about your experience at UCLA. Oh, you happen to surf. So do I. I enjoy doing that as well. You would be surprised at if you make these networking connections much more personalized and trying to learn about them from a personal standpoint, how far that will go for you in terms of building a stronger network. And the third topic, Steve, I'll let you go. Is there anything you want to add to the Trojan horse concept? Good? Okay.
No,
and then,
I'm good. Thank you.
So another third thing to be cognizant of when you're going through these introductory conversations is what me and Steve like to call this tug of war ratio. Always be cognizant to make sure that the conversation is 50% about them, but also 50% about you. If you feel like you're talking too much about yourself, make sure to ask them more about them. This conversation should always be a give and take between trying to find a little bit about them as well as a little bit about you. So it's this constant tug of war. If they come to you with 3 questions, you go right back at them with 3 questions. Always try to make sure that you are living in that balance of 50% and 50%.
Yeah, and the person who asks the questions tends to control the conversation, and you'll find people who only want to ask questions, and it feels one-sided. And they ask you a question, you respond, you're like, and then they're just right back with another question. So finding a way to flip it and ask a question back.
Definitely. And very important. Make sure to talk about, and this is the points at the very bottom for the secrets and the obvious, appropriate Trojan horses only. It's good to talk about things that are lighthearted. And what I mean by that is try to avoid religion and politics, something that's a little bit more personal or emotionally triggering. Try to stick with something lighthearted. I think that that's the best way to build a rapport and make sure that the relationship and that conversation goes very well. So what I would ask all of you guys is to pull a sheet of paper out right now to be able to start addressing what we call the elevator pitch. Now, how I would develop the elevator pitch is just think of it as your personal story. Who are you? What brought you to this event? What are you looking to accomplish by coming to this event? You know, all of us being recent graduates or people who are still in college, we have been ingrained with this idea of the 5-paragraph essay, this introductory paragraph, 3 body paragraphs and a conclusion. The elevator pitch is just your thesis, the summary of what makes you who you are, what you do, and how you find purpose within that. So, and being able to communicate that to people and say, and this is why I'm on the pursuit of this. through, hey, so for Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot in a little bit, but for elevator pitches, it's all about being able to tell your story and how you got to that point and exactly what you're looking to do going forward. Steve, you have 30 seconds. You want to give an elevator pitch?
You want me to give my elevator pitch? I knew you would do this, and I was still not ready for this. My elevator pitch would be pretty straightforward. Like, my name is Steve. I'm CFO at the law school. We're a top tier law school. I'm a double Bruin, and I'm a huge believer in education, whether higher education or actual practical skills. And it's my mission in life to help others learn the skills and the traits to become successful as people and as professionals. So I'd love to talk more. Here's my card. Thanks, Craig.
Awesome. You beat the 30-second timer.
Hey, how about you? Do you have a elevator pitch you're ready to present?
I do. Here, I'll even give you I'll give you I like to think the creative one. So a little fun fact about me, you guys, is during my time at UCLA, I was a football player. I played at UCLA. I was actually one of the backup quarterbacks. And one thing that you learn very quickly about being a quarterback is the importance of having an offensive line to protect you from the unforeseen risks that are coming that you never see coming. So now my role in what I do, which is a commercial insurance broker, I help be the offensive line to the CEOs of certain middle market companies, specifically for nonprofits. So my job is to protect nonprofits from the unforeseen risks that are coming their way and making sure that they're financially secure to be able to handle that.
But one thing that people often don't teach when it comes to networking is how to get out of a conversation. Raise your hand if you've been stuck in some conversation with someone who just talks and talks. Maxime, right? Like, and you're just like, you're like, and shoot, like I've talked to plenty of people who are like, I was stuck in that person talking for 45 minutes, right? You lose out opportunities, and maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not. So a couple of tips in terms of trying to get out of a conversation. We've grouped them to 3 basic categories in terms of trying to like really get in there and it's not quite cut the person off, but find a segue in there when there's that brief breath of before the next sentence gets started. And so doing something that has gratitude in it, so it doesn't feel so tough cutting the person off. Like, thanks for the talk today. Thanks for the recommendation. Or like, I'm so glad we met, right? And so that doesn't feel so abrupt. Or maybe you create a diversion. I know people who will pull out their phone pretending they got a text like, oh, excuse me, right? or the question of, hey, do you have a business card? That's another diversionary tactic. And my favorite of all is the good old switcheroo. Maybe you know someone and they happen to walk up to the table that you're at, and I'm like, have you met Craig? There you go. You shake hands and you are out of there. And that's kind of a jerk move, so don't always do that. But those are ways to get out of a conversation. A couple of tips. Like when if you get a business card, what I've done, and oftentimes I've collected the business cards and I'm like, oh man, I cannot remember who said what. As soon as I'm done, I will always have a pen with me. I'll take the card, I'll write the date, the function, and a couple of things. And that'll be helpful as we talk about the next slide. And then the obvious, don't cut someone off. And so, Craig, let's go to the next slide. The follow-up. Now you've gotten out of the conversation, you've had a good time. Following up is key. I've had so many conversations, great conversations. Here's my business card. Please follow. Shoot me an email, and then nothing happens. So you want to follow up. This is the recollection of who you are. If you're going to do it via email, putting something, hey, I loved your story about when you traveled to Peru. I hope to go one day too, right? So personalizing that the experience, the conversation you had, just gives them a little bit thicker connection. Ego stroke. Hey, I think I'm excited that to learn about you and your position and how you managed to go on your career path. That's stroking your ego, or some sort of compliment. And then, but the why, like what's behind your connection. And that's not just like, I want a job, or, hey, I'd like to, stay in contact and and learn more about your experience, or maybe I can ask you a question later on. So defining that, but it is contingent upon that follow-up, whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's email, and the situation is going to be different depending on how close the connection is or what the event is.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Steve. And a very important thing to remember is that there are stages to everything in networking. This is always a comparison I like to make, but networking is a lot like dating. After the first date, it's not necessarily a great idea to propose and think that you're getting married. There's stages to every single part of that. And just as similar to the John Wooden pyramid of success, there is a pyramid of prospecting and networking. It's important to know that the stage of how this goes about is, first, people will know you. They will finally recognize, oh, this is Steve. I know his name. I know Steve Yu. But then they'll get to the phase of, I do like Steve Yu. I like him. He's a very good guy. Then they have to get to the phase of trusting you. And these are all a part of it's a process where maybe necessarily some can happen quicker than others, but they have to know you, they have to like you, and they have to trust you before they're necessarily willing to refer you or find opportunities on your behalf. This goes for not only sales, but it goes for relationships. If and when you were to ask someone for the opportunity, like I know Steve is a very, very busy guy. It's hard to, if I just met him once, to say, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee and hang out for an hour and a half. I would have to understand that maybe it's a phone call first. Maybe it's a quick, brief chat over 20 minutes before we can get to that stage. Again, just always be cognizant that relationships take time. Networking takes time. And it will be a process to be able to get where you want, but just know that there is a process, and that process will lead to what you want to get, as long as we check these boxes of that they know you, they like you, and that they trust you. Steve, anything to add to that?
No, I think you made some relevant points, and just being really sensitive and respectful of people's time, and not just assuming that they'll want to jump on an hour Zoom to talk about stuff. Some people have that time, but many people have families and kids and partners and whatnot. So, and time being pretty valuable, I think a lot of people are feeling pretty stretched. So, I would just say be sensitive and respectful of that. Maria says, I think from one of the previous slides, this technique is taught in every fraternity. Is that the switch one? Is that what you're referring to, Marius? Yeah. Okay. About the good old switcheroo.
About the exit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well pointed out. That was good insight.
Great.
Okay, next slide. So look, here's the deal. We're young. How can we find ways to differentiate? I know for me, there are a lot of times where I walk into networking events and I tend to be the youngest person in the room by a wide margin. The truth is how I see it, our age group is now at an advantage right now during this pandemic, during COVID. Why? Because we're tech savvy. We know how to go about navigating UCLA One, LinkedIn. It sounds like there was an awesome presentation on LinkedIn for you guys earlier that really helped kind of unpack that. I would just say really double down on that. Show them that you are the person, the female, to be able to really dive into that and show your ability to excel on LinkedIn as well as UCLA One. But one thing that I want to make sure to double emphasize is the importance of the personal touch. Emails are great. We love to be able to connect with people on a constant basis, but never forget the concept that a phone call goes so far, or at least even a personal video. If you could send that, those are different ways to really add this personal touch during the pandemic that, for me at least, have gone a long margin. One thing I would say that if you guys happen to want to look into a software that provides this, I will throw this out. BombBomb.com has a way where you can send emails, but it's just a video of you talking through the email. So, when people are getting long, inundated emails all of the time, especially now during this pandemic, send them a personal video of you just talking to them saying, hey, Steve, I miss you. Hope you're doing well. I know you're busy being the CFO of UCLA, but let's get a cup of coffee soon. By the way, happy Thanksgiving. Something like that. It adds a personal touch to this virtual background. And that's a way to be able to differentiate and get over the hump of just them looking at us and say, hey, this guy's clearly young and just emerging in his career. And the final thing that I would just double down on, depth. Be persistent and make sure to show them consistency through that. You will overcome a lot of barriers as long as you show them that you're dedicated to what you're trying to do.